In the wake of a devastating earthquake in Myanmar, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has faced significant scrutiny regarding the Biden administration's response, or apparent lack thereof. The earthquake, which struck on March 28 with a magnitude of 7.7, has resulted in a tragic death toll of 3,354 and left thousands injured or missing. Critics, including former officials from the United States Agency for International Development (USAID), have pointed to the administration's previous cuts to humanitarian aid as a key factor in the U.S. inability to dispatch immediate rescue teams. During a recent interview with the BBC, Rubio dismissed these criticisms, asserting that the U.S. is not the government of the world, and emphasized that other wealthy nations should also contribute to humanitarian efforts. "There's a lot of other rich countries in the world, they should all be pitching in," he stated. Rubio noted that while the U.S. has personnel in the region and is prepared to assist, the complexity of operating within Myanmar, particularly under the military junta, poses additional challenges. The controversy surrounding the U.S. response is compounded by the Trump administration's controversial decision to dismantle significant portions of USAID. Observers have pointed out that the agency's closure has hindered America's capacity to respond effectively to global disasters. According to former USAID officials, the lack of operational infrastructure meant that the U.S. could not deploy its Disaster Assistance Response Team DART to Myanmar, which typically includes hundreds of rescue workers and specialized equipment. Rubio, however, has attributed the delay in assistance to the military regime's restrictive policies, claiming that any impediments were not solely due to U.S. budget cuts. "That would have impeded our response no matter what," he remarked, highlighting the complex geopolitical dynamics that affect disaster response in the region. As for the future of U.S. humanitarian aid, Rubio reaffirmed the administration's commitment to working with governments and NGOs that provide direct assistance. He expressed a clear intention to pivot away from funding large international NGOs that, in his view, consume excessive resources without delivering adequate help. "We are no longer going to spend $100 million to get $10 million to recipients," he insisted, signaling a shift in how the U.S. will engage in global humanitarian efforts. This situation unfolds against a backdrop of escalating tensions regarding the ongoing war in Ukraine, where Rubio is also vocal about U.S. foreign policy. During meetings with NATO allies in Brussels, he indicated that the U.S. is growing impatient with Russia's commitment to peace negotiations. "We will know soon enough, in a matter of weeks, not months, whether Russia is serious about peace or not," he stated, emphasizing that the actions taken by the Kremlin will be scrutinized closely. In the face of continued Russian aggression, including recent missile strikes that resulted in civilian casualties, the Biden administration, while managing its humanitarian response to disasters like the Myanmar earthquake, is also navigating the complexities of international diplomacy in Eastern Europe. Rubio's statements reflect a dual focus, addressing immediate humanitarian crises while also applying pressure on nations that threaten global stability. As the world watches the unfolding humanitarian disaster in Myanmar and the continuing conflict in Ukraine, the effectiveness of U.S. foreign policy will likely come under increased scrutiny. Rubio's remarks suggest a readiness to adapt strategies, but only time will reveal whether these shifts will lead to meaningful change in both humanitarian aid and international diplomatic relations. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining the U.S.'s role on the global stage, particularly in fostering cooperation among nations to address pressing humanitarian needs and geopolitical threats. In a series of significant developments, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is at the center of both international diplomacy and domestic military policy reform. Hegseth's upcoming travel to Panama coincides with a notable absence from the upcoming Ramstein format summit focused on Ukraine, marking a shift in U.S. defense posture under the Trump administration. Hegseth is set to participate in the 2025 Central American Security Conference in Panama next week, where he will engage with regional leaders amid heightened concerns over Chinese influence in the strategically vital Panama Canal. This visit follows President Donald Trump's assertions that the U.S. is being overcharged for using the canal and his criticism of past administrations for relinquishing control over it. Despite Trump's claims, the Panamanian government has firmly denied any Chinese dominance over the waterway. Sean Parnell, chief Pentagon spokesman, emphasized that Hegseth's agenda will concentrate on fostering partnerships within the region, particularly for a secure Western Hemisphere. In contrast, Hegseth will not attend the upcoming Ramstein summit in Brussels, which has become a crucial platform for coordinating military support for Ukraine. This absence will mark the first time since the summit's inception in 2022 that the U.S. Secretary of Defense will not be present, raising eyebrows about the Biden administration's shifting priorities under Trump's leadership. During this period, the administration has begun scaling back involvement in international pro-Ukraine initiatives as it seeks to broker peace between Kyiv and Moscow. Hegseth's prior remarks at a recent summit where he labeled Ukraine's NATO accession as unrealistic signify a stark departure from previous U.S. commitments. Domestically, Hegseth has stirred controversy with a new directive that mandates the military to implement sex-neutral combat fitness tests. This decision, aimed at standardizing physical fitness requirements across genders, has raised concerns among military women and experts who fear it could adversely impact recruitment and retention rates. Hegseth's memo instructs military departments to submit plans for these changes within a 60-day timeframe, with implementation expected within 6 months. Critics argue that such a blanket approach may overlook the complexities of physical readiness and the varying demands of different military roles. Before his confirmation as Defense Secretary, Hegseth had controversially stated that women should not serve in combat roles, although he later retracted this position. Current military leaders have expressed skepticism about whether the new standards will genuinely enhance combat readiness or simply serve as a means to enforce uniformity without addressing the unique challenges faced by female service members. Retired military personnel and advocates have voiced their concerns, stating that Hegseth's actions may ultimately aim to restrict women's roles in the military altogether. This sentiment is echoed by various military experts who caution that the push for higher physical standards could hinder recruitment efforts, especially among women, who have historically faced challenges meeting these rigorous benchmarks. As Hegseth embarks on his diplomatic mission to Panama while navigating contentious domestic reforms, the implications of these actions will likely reverberate through both international relations and military policy. The defense landscape is evolving rapidly, and stakeholders are keenly watching how these developments will shape the future of U.S. military strategy and its role on the global stage. In a surprising turn of events, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, has acknowledged that approximately 20% of the recent job cuts within his department were made in error. The admission comes in the wake of sweeping layoffs that are part of a controversial effort by the Trump administration to reduce the federal workforce, particularly within the Department of Health and Human Services (HHS). This initiative, which has already resulted in the termination of about 10,000 employees out of a total workforce of 82,000, has raised significant concerns regarding the impact on public health initiatives. Kennedy, formerly an environmental attorney and a prominent figure in the anti-vaccine movement, stated personnel that should not have been cut were cut. He emphasized that some of the affected employees were integral to critical research programs, including a CDC initiative focused on monitoring lead exposure in children. There were some programs that were cut that are being reinstated, and I believe that that's one, Kennedy clarified, indicating that certain vital functions were mistakenly targeted during the layoffs. The job cuts implemented under the so-called Department of Government Efficiency (DOGE) aim to streamline operations but have been met with widespread criticism. The former FDA Commissioner Robert Califf described the layoffs as a dark day for public health, highlighting the potential long-term consequences of losing experienced professionals across diverse areas such as smoking prevention, infertility, and mine safety. Kennedy's comments reflect a troubling admission of haste in executing these cuts, suggesting a lack of thorough planning and oversight. The announcement of reinstating a portion of the laid-off employees raises pressing questions about the future operations of HHS. It remains unclear which specific roles will be revived and what functions the department will ultimately retain. Given the extensive nature of the cuts, experts warn that the ramifications could hinder ongoing public health efforts, particularly at a time when the nation is grappling with various health crises. Kennedy's controversial nomination and approach have drawn scrutiny, especially as he grapples with conflicting views on vaccines and public health policy. During recent Senate hearings, he faced intense questioning about his past statements and their implications for public health. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy expressed concern over Kennedy's influence, particularly regarding vaccine skepticism, which he linked to detrimental health outcomes for vulnerable individuals. The restructuring plan, while touted to potentially save taxpayers $1.8 billion annually, has yet to demonstrate how it will not affect essential services. As the CDC and FDA cope with the aftermath of these layoffs, the full extent of the impact remains to be seen. Kennedy's admissions may signal a shift in the administration's approach to governance, emphasizing the need for a more measured strategy in managing critical health resources. Looking ahead, the future of the HHS and its capability to effectively manage public health initiatives hangs in the balance. With the Senate poised to vote on Kennedy's confirmation, the stakes are high, and the public will be watching closely to see how the department navigates the fallout from these unprecedented cuts. As Kennedy attempts to restore confidence in his leadership, the need for clarity and accountability within the HHS has never been more urgent. In a significant development within the realm of gun rights and legal reforms, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has taken steps to address a long-standing issue regarding the restoration of firearm rights for individuals previously deemed prohibited. This move, which comes in the wake of changes to regulatory authority, has sparked discussions about the implications for both public safety and individuals who may have lost their rights under questionable circumstances. Bondi's interim final rule, which took effect recently, aims to breathe new life into the legal process that allows prohibited persons to regain their Second Amendment rights. Historically, this process had been delegated to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives (ATF), an agency barred by Congress from accepting applications for relief from firearms disabilities. The rule rescinds the delegation, signaling a shift toward empowering the Attorney General to facilitate the restoration of rights for those who pose no threat to public safety. For decades, law-abiding Americans who have had their gun rights unfairly restricted have been left in legal limbo, stated Eric Pratt, Senior Vice President of Gun Owners of America. He emphasized that the withdrawal of ATF's authority is a positive sign that the current administration is committed to protecting the Second Amendment for all citizens. The legal landscape surrounding gun ownership is complex. Under federal law, individuals convicted of certain crimes, including non-violent offenses, are often prohibited from owning firearms, regardless of the nature of their past actions. The law under 18 U.S.C. 922G casts a wide net, disallowing gun possession for anyone convicted of a crime punishable by imprisonment for over a year, irrespective of the offense's nature. This broad categorization has raised concerns about fairness, particularly in cases involving individuals with no history of violence. For instance, former President Donald Trump lost his gun rights due to felony convictions related to non-violent offenses, underscoring the absurdities of the current system. Bondi's directive is framed within a broader context of Second Amendment jurisprudence, particularly in light of evolving public perceptions and legal interpretations since the early 1990s. The rule acknowledges that while no constitutional right is absolute, there exists a need for a practical avenue to restore rights to individuals who have demonstrated law-abiding behavior post-conviction. In a notable instance underscoring the complexities of this issue, Mel Gibson, the controversial actor and vocal supporter of Trump, recently had his gun rights restored after a decade-long prohibition stemming from a domestic violence conviction. The decision to reinstate Gibson's rights has ignited debate over the ethics of allowing individuals with histories of domestic violence to possess firearms, raising questions about public safety versus individual rights. Elizabeth G. Oyer, a DOJ attorney who opposed the restoration of Gibson's rights, was reportedly fired after pushing back against the decision, highlighting internal conflicts within the Justice Department regarding the matter. As Bondi's rule unfolds, it remains to be seen how it will affect not only individuals like Gibson but also the broader landscape of gun rights restoration. The Justice Department is expected to propose legislative changes to address the funding rider that has historically hampered the restoration process, indicating a willingness to revisit and possibly reshape the criteria under which individuals can regain their rights. Looking ahead, the implications of Bondi's actions could resonate widely. The decision to empower the Attorney General with the authority to restore firearm rights may signal a shift in how the legal system addresses the balance between public safety and personal freedoms. As the conversation around gun rights continues to evolve, stakeholders on all sides of the debate are likely to keep a close eye on the forthcoming legislative proposals and their potential impacts on Americans' Second Amendment rights. In a recent tumultuous episode for the Trump administration, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent finds himself at a crossroads amid the fallout from President Donald Trump's controversial tariff announcements. During an appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe host Stephanie Ruhle reported that Bessent is allegedly seeking an exit strategy from his role, a development that underscores growing tensions within the administration as the stock market reels from Trump's aggressive trade policies. The catalyst for Bessent's potential departure appears to be the fallout from Trump's Liberation Day tariff declaration, which introduced a sweeping 10% tariff on all U.S. imports. This move not only rattled investors but also resulted in the Dow Jones Industrial Average experiencing its worst day since 2020, as noted by Investors Business Daily. Rule's sources indicated that Bessent, who has a history of successfully managing hedge funds, feels increasingly sidelined within Trump's inner circle, where his economic insights seem to be falling on deaf ears. "Some sources have said to me he's looking for an exit door to try to get himself to the Fed," she stated, suggesting that Bessent is acutely aware of the damage these tariffs could inflict on his reputation and the broader market. Bessent's perspective is particularly poignant given his previous warnings about the ramifications of such tariffs. Just days before the announcement, he had advised countries not to retaliate against U.S. tariffs, calling the approach maximalist and cautioning that retaliation could escalate tensions further. His earlier comments reflect a keen understanding of market dynamics, especially in a global economy that relies heavily on trade. "If you don't retaliate, this is the high water mark," he said, urging restraint from foreign nations. However, his advice appears to have fallen on deaf ears as China promptly responded with its own 34% tariff on U.S. imports, further exacerbating the situation. Critics, including Ruhle, have pointed to the lack of support for Trump's tariffs even among his business allies, suggesting that the economic rationale behind them is flimsy at best. Ruhle commented, "I cannot find one single investor with one single argument that makes sense for these tariffs." This sentiment echoes a wider unease in the business community regarding the implications of a trade war, especially for working-class Americans who rely on affordable imports. Bessent's position as Treasury Secretary seems increasingly precarious. Described as the odd man out in Trump's administration, he has struggled to align his economic vision with the president's often erratic policies. His past comments in favor of tariffs as economic sanctions reveal a conflicting stance, as he previously defended such measures while now grappling with their immediate negative impacts on the market and the economy at large. As the situation unfolds, the future remains uncertain for both Bessent and the Trump administration. With the stock market reacting unfavorably to these developments and potential future increases in tariffs looming, the administration's economic strategy may face increasing scrutiny. Bessent's possible departure could mark a significant shift in Trump's economic team, raising questions about who will fill the void and how that individual will navigate the turbulent waters of trade policy in an increasingly interconnected global economy. As the administration grapples with the consequences of its tariff policies, the implications for both domestic and international markets will be crucial to monitor in the coming months. The evolving dynamics suggest that this story is far from over, and the ramifications of these decisions will likely shape economic discourse for the foreseeable future. In a recent series of statements, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has expressed confidence that the American markets will rebound strongly in the long term despite the immediate turmoil caused by the Trump administration's announcement of reciprocal tariffs on various countries. The tariffs unveiled during what President Trump termed Liberation Day have already sent shockwaves through the financial markets, with the SPDR S&P 500 dropping approximately 3.85% in reaction to the news. Lutnick, speaking on CNBC's Squawk Box, acknowledged the potential for short-term economic pain due to the tariffs but insisted that this move would ultimately lead to a reordering of fair trade. He emphasized that the tariffs are not merely a reaction to existing trade barriers but also a strategic push to get other nations to reconsider their trade policies toward the U.S. "I expect most countries to start to really examine their trade policy towards the United States and stop picking on us," Lutnick stated, projecting an optimistic outlook for American commerce. Economists, however, remain wary. Concerns are rising that these tariffs could ignite a global trade war, with retaliatory measures potentially leading to a U.S. recession. As Lutnick conveyed, the administration believes that it holds leverage in negotiations, which could lead to more favorable trade agreements in the future. "We're talking to all the major countries of the world, and we've been talking to them for more than a month," he noted. The secretary expressed a belief that over time countries will treat the U.S. more equitably. The economic implications of these tariffs are significant. Lower interest rates, Lutnick predicted, will encourage domestic production and consumption, ultimately strengthening the American economy. He suggested that the U.S. will increasingly become a producer of goods it consumes, which could reshape the landscape of global trade. Meanwhile, the unfolding situation has drawn international attention, with leaders from other countries closely monitoring the potential for escalating tensions. European Central Bank policymaker Isabel Schnabel warned of a dramatic surge in uncertainty that could exacerbate existing economic headwinds in the Eurozone as a result of the tariffs. In addition, the complexities of these tariffs are underscored by the reactions from various sectors. For example, billionaire entrepreneur Mark Cuban, co-founder of Cost Plus Drugs, was initially concerned that tariffs imposed on India would force him to raise medication prices. However, the exemption of the pharmaceutical sector from these tariffs has alleviated some of those fears. As Lutnick's optimistic outlook contrasts sharply with the apprehensions expressed by economists and global investors, the true impact of these tariffs remains to be seen. The administration's strategy may indeed pave the way for a recalibrated trade environment, but the immediate ramifications on the markets indicate a period of heightened volatility. Looking ahead, the ongoing dialogue between the U.S. and its trading partners will be critical. The outcomes of these negotiations could redefine trade relationships and economic stability in the coming years. As Secretary Lutnick affirmed, over time, the U.S. markets are poised to perform extremely well, but the path to that future will likely be fraught with challenges and uncertainties. As the world watches, the unfolding narrative of U.S. trade policy will undoubtedly shape the economic landscape on a global scale.